האם זה באמת סגולה בדוקה? הסגולה ללמוד בזה?
Erev Tov, good evening and Dobra V'Etcher, everyone. We are in the Zera Shimshon on Parsha Shlach, and we're doing Os Tes. This is section number 9. As is well known, the Parsha of Tzitzis appears in this week's Parsha. And in the Parsha of Tzitzis, as is also well known, because we say it in the Shema, in the reading of the Shema twice a day, at least, we know that it mentions Hashem taking the Jewish people out of Mitzrayim. It mentions the Yitzias Mitzrayim in the Parsha of Tzitzis. So the question that the Zera Shimshon is going to deal with, based on a Gemara, is why does it mention Yitzias Mitzrayim, the Exodus from Egypt, in the Parsha of Tzitzis? What is the connection between those two things? So just before we start, it's important that I give you a little preliminary information. First of all, we're going to take a look at 3 psukim from Sefer Tehillim. These 3 psukim do not seem to talk at all in any way, by any stretch of the imagination. They don't seem to relate to Tzitzis or to Yitzias Mitzrayim or to the other 2 mitzvot that the Zera Shimshon is going to mention. But of course, this, what the Zera Shimshon is going to do, the challenge he's going to set for himself, is to show us how these psukim are actually referring to things that we would not see, that we don't see when we read the words of the psukim, but he will show us and connect all the dots for us to make connections, again, that aren't going to be the least bit obvious to us. So we'll start with the 3 psukim in Tehillim, and then also there'll be a few words of explanation when the Zera Shimshon in the first paragraph mentions a Gemara and Bava Metzia that we'll need to explain also, and then we'll be able to understand at least the beginning of what's happening here. Okay, the psukim, Perek Chav Ches in Tehillim, psukim Gimel through Hey. Al timshacheni im rishoyim. Do not drag me, or do not include me with the wicked, ve'im po'ale oven, and with the doers of evil, dovrei shalom im re'ehem, those who speak peace with their friends, ve'ra'a bilvavam, and there is evil in their hearts. Next pasuk, ten lahem kifa'olam, give to them according to their actions, uchiroa ma'alalehem, and according to the evil of their plans, kima'aseh yedehem ten lahem, according to the actions of their hands give to them, hashev gimulam lahem, return their recompense to them, punish them for in the way that they deserve to be punished, in other words. Last pasuk, pasuk Hey, ki lo yavinu el peulos Hashem, because they do not understand the actions of Hashem, ve'el ma'aseh yodov, and they also do not understand the actions of his hands, yeher same, destroy them, velo yivneim, and do not rebuild them. So those 3 psukim, the Zera Shimshon is going to give us kind of a little bit of a deep dive to show us hidden information and hidden connections, again, that we would not see, that we did not see now when we read those psukim, that would not occur to us. Okay, let's continue. Let's read the first paragraph in the Zera Shimshon. Again, Os Tes, section number 9. Al timshacheni im rishayim, do not include me with the wicked, v'chule, etc. Elu hapsukim, these psukim, these 3 psukim that we just read, misbarim al hahi de perek hey de mitzia. They can be explained according to what the Gemara says in the 5th chapter of Bava Metzia. And now he's going to give a kind of abbreviated quote, a short paraphrase of that Gemara. Lama li de kosav yitzias Mitzrayim. The Gemara over there asked, why is it that the idea of Yitzias Mitzrayim, the phenomenon and the concept of the Exodus from Egypt, why is it written b'tzitzis in the part of the Torah, the section of the Torah that talks about tzitzis, which of course is in our Parsha? Beribis, and Yetzias Mitzrayim is also mentioned when the Torah talks about the prohibition of charging interest, of lending money with ribis, with interest, uva mishkolos, and where the Torah talks about having weights and measurements that are strictly accurate and not trying to cheat anyone with false weights or false measurements. The Torah also mentions Yetzias Mitzrayim. The Torah also mentions the Exodus from Egypt. So the Gemara in Baba Metzia asked the question, why is it that the Exodus from Egypt is mentioned in connection with those three parshios, those three sections of the Torah? As we discussed at length previously, Parshas Kedoshim, on the Parsha of Kedoshim in Sefer Vayikra, the Ayin Sham, and look over there. So we need to stop here because the Zera Shimshon, as he often does, assumes that we have more knowledge than we might have. He assumes that we know what the Gemara in Baba Metzia says about these the connection between Yetzias Mitzrayim and these three mitzvos. So let's fill ourselves in about that so that we do know what he's referring to. Over there in the Gemara says that in each of the three mitzvos of tzitzis, of ribis, of charging interest, and of having proper and accurate weights, in each of those three parts or sections of the Torah, it is possible for a person to trick and deceive other people. And the reason that Yetzias Mitzrayim is mentioned is to send the message to anyone who's thinking of trying to violate those mitzvos by deceiving or trickery, to let them know, just like Hashem demonstrated clearly that he can't be fooled and he can't be tricked. During the Exodus from Egypt, Hashem demonstrated that, and we'll explain in a moment. Just like he demonstrated that, so too with each of these mitzvos, if you try and trick people, you might get away with it, but you will never be able to trick Hashem when it comes to these three mitzvos of tzitzis, ribis, interest, charging interest, and having weights that are not accurate. Okay, how did Hashem show that he can't be fooled or tricked, and that he has a very strong discriminating sense? How did Hashem show that with the Yetzias Mitzrayim? So the Gemara in Baba Metzia over there says that when it came time to kill the firstborn, the 10th plague of Makas Bechoros, if Hashem had sent any human emissary to carry out mass killings of the firstborn and assassinations, they would have no way of doing it, no matter how many people Hashem sent, because to people it's impossible to distinguish unless you know the family members. It's impossible to see someone and say, oh, this is a firstborn. A firstborn child could easily look like his brother, like someone else in the family, or for that matter, like a nephew or a cousin, or there's no way. There's no identifying mark that makes it obvious that someone is a firstborn son. And therefore, it was only Hashem who was able to distinguish which Egyptian children were actually the firstborns, and therefore they were killed at that time. Only Hashem was capable of discerning that. Again, no human being could discern that. So too, once we see that Hashem has that incredible ability of discernment way above and beyond, of course, anything that human beings would be capable of, then we can apply that to the three mitzvos that the Gemara talks about. And then the Gemara makes it clear how to apply them, and let's explain that. Let's talk about that as well. When it comes to the mitzvah of tzitzis, the Gemara says a person might think that they can take some very inexpensive plant-based dye, like from the plant indigo, which has a similar color of techelis, of the blue that the Torah commands, and they could just take a dye from a plant and dye their tzitzis, and no one will be able to know the difference. And that's true. A person could in fact do that, and the person could go to shul, and no one would know the difference. People might even admire the person's tzitzis. Oh, look at those beautiful techelis, those beautiful blue strings in your tzitzis. However, Hashem, of course, can distinguish and know to a certainty whether or not the person has used a false and a fake dye, a plant-based dye, or the correct dye, which comes from a sea creature called chilazon, and the Gemara points out that that's a very expensive dye to get a hold of, because this particular sea creature, the chilazon, only comes up out of the ocean and can be captured very rarely. So therefore, that's how tzitzis is an example of something that requires Hashem's discernment. Next is the mitzvah of ribbis. We know that it is forbidden to charge ribbis, to lend someone money and to tell them they need to pay you back more. And it's also forbidden to pay ribbis. Let's imagine a person says, I don't care, I'm making a living by charging ribbis. Well, even if you need the money and you want to borrow money from that person, you have your own mitzvah not to pay that person ribbis, not to pay that person interest. What happens if a guy, a very shrewd Jewish businessman, says, I'm going to go around and I'm going to lend money on interest, and when other Jews say to me, you can't charge interest and we can't pay interest, I will tell them that this is money that has been given to me from a non-Jew. I'm representing a non-Jew. It's his money. I'm just the middleman. I'm just going around making these transactions. I'm not actually lending the money. It's not my money. It's the non-Jew's money. Well, that person might be able to trick a lot of people and deceive them into thinking that it's not his money, but Hashem will know it's his money, and Hashem will know he's violating the prohibition of ribbis, of charging interest. And not only that, but he's tricking other Jews into paying interest and paying ribbis. So there again, human discernment won't necessarily root out this person's deception, but Hashem will. And then when it comes to the weights, the inaccurate weights, the Gemara says there's a way to take your weights and to bury them in salt. And in such a way, they gain weight, they become a little heavier, but a person will not see them. When you take them out of the salt, a person will not see that discern that they're any different, but Hashem, of course, will know. And therefore, when you use those weights to, let's say, get more of a product than you should be allowed, than you're paying for, Hashem will know, even though others may not. So that's the explanation of the Gemara that the Zera Shimshon wants us to know from Bava Metzia about the connection between Yetzias Mitzrayim, specifically Hashem's killing of the firstborn and identification of the firstborn, and the mitzvos of tzitzis, ribbis, and weights. Now, the next step is where the Zera Shimshon is going to show us how all of that fits into the 3 psukim that we read in Tehillim. And here we'll have to go step by step to see the connections that the Zera Shimshon makes, because, as we've mentioned already, they're definitely not obvious. The connections are not going to be obvious to us. But let us begin with the next paragraph in the Zera Shimshon. Al timshecheni im rishoyim. The first words in the first pasuk that we read and that the Zera Shimshon quotes from Tehillim are, do not include me with the wicked. What does that mean in our context? Osam shetolim kola ilon v'chule. This refers to people who take the indigo leaves and they use the dye to color their tzitzis. So they're trying to trick people into thinking that they're wearing techeles in their tzitzis, but they're not really doing that. These words, don't include me with the Rishonim, refers to those people. V'lovshim beged shel arba kanafos, and they are wearing a garment with 4 corners below tzitzis, without the correct tzitzis, meaning not according to the Torah's command to wear authentic techeles, authentic blue dye from the chilazon, from the proper sea creature in the tzitzis. They are not doing that. Nimtza shehem mevatlim b'mezid es mitzvah. So we find that these people are intentionally nullifying the mitzvah of wearing techeles on their tzitzis, and that's why David HaMelech refers to them as rishoyim, as wicked people, someone who intentionally tries to trick others into thinking they're doing a mitzvah, but doesn't do the mitzvah and is not doing the mitzvah. That person can be called a rasha. And so, al timshecheni im rishoyim, don't include me with the wicked. The Zera Shimshon says that's a reference to the people who are wearing the false tzitzis, the false techeles. Continuing, ve'im po ale oven, And the pasuk continues, do not include me with the doers of evil or the doers of corruption. Hainu mi shetomein mishkalosav b'melach. This refers to people who bury their weights in salt. As we said, this is a way of manipulating their weights and tricking people about how much their weights actually are, and what they're going to do is deceive people and take advantage of them because their weights are off. They're not correct. Ki to'avas Hashem kol osei ovel. And this connects to the pasuk where the Torah has the prohibition of the mitzvah of using accurate weights and not using, refraining from using inaccurate weights. It says, Ki to'avas Hashem, it is an abomination to Hashem, kol osei ovel, all who do this corruption. So there's a connection there between po'alei oven and kol osei ovel. And that's why the reference in our pasuk in Tehillim can be said to connect to the people who use inaccurate weights. Continuing in the top of the next paragraph, Dovrei Shalom v'chulei. Then at the end of the pasuk, it talked about people who speak peace with their friends, but have evil in their hearts. Misha tole ma'osav benachri, someone who tells people that his money came from a non-Jew, that it's not his money, it's a non-Jewish person's money. She'omer lachavero, and he says to his friend, Shalom yelanu, there'll be peace for us, meaning we're not violating any prohibition. Hashem will be fine with our transaction because it's not my money. It's not my money that I'm lending you with interest. It's this non-Jew's money, and there's no prohibition to pay a non-Jew interest. And of course, there's no prohibition for a non-Jew to charge interest when he lends people money. So this person who falsely says that is going to say, Dovrei Shalom, he's going to speak peace and tell everyone, this is fine, this is okay, there's no problem with this business transaction. Uvilvavo yesh ra'a, but in his heart there is evil. Sheyodea shehem shelo, he knows the money is his. He knows very well that he is intentionally violating the prohibition against charging interest, and he's deceiving people and getting them to violate the prohibition as well, all based on a lie that he knows is false. So there's evil in his heart, even though he's speaking about everything being okay. So that takes us through, that paragraph takes us through the first of the three psukim in Tehillim and shows, as Zera Shimshon has shown us, how each of the phrases in that pasuk can refer to one of the three mitzvos discussed in the Gemara in Baba Metzia that we started with in the opening paragraph. And now he's going to continue and look at the second pasuk of the three psukim. V'lachem, and therefore, ten lahem kifa'olam ucheroa ma'alalehem. The next pasuk, the second pasuk that starts with the words, give them according to their actions and according to the evil of their plans or of their deeds. The Amrinan Gemara. This is also based on that Gemara in Baba Metzia and something else it says over there. Al Misha Tomein Mishkalosav. The Gemara says that someone who manipulates his weights, the Gemara asks, V'haka over al pal tigzol. Why do we need a special prohibition against having inaccurate weights when if you use inaccurate weights, you're already violating the prohibition? You're going to be violating the prohibition of stealing. You will be deceiving people in monetary matters, and they will be paying you more than they're supposed to pay you. You're stealing. In other words, you're stealing money from people. So the Gemara asks, why do we need a special prohibition about these having these inaccurate weights when no matter what, as soon as you use them, you'll be violating an already existing prohibition? Why do we need to add a new prohibition? So the Gemara answers, Lavor alav mishas asiya, to make it so that a person will be transgressing, as soon as they make the dishonest weights. As soon as a person actually manipulates their weights and does something to them, for example, in our case, buries them in salt and lets that change the weight of the actual weight of the weights. As soon as a person does that, even without using those weights, they're already violating a prohibition. And that's what the Torah wanted to accomplish. It wanted to make it not only that people don't use inaccurate weights, but they never form or do anything to manipulate in a dishonest way their weights. Va'afilu eino mishtamesh bohem. And even if they don't use them, osur lasos kach, it is forbidden to make them, to do this. It's forbidden to make inaccurate, dishonest weights. Mishum, based on a pasuk from Iyov, ve'al tashkein ba'ohalecha avla, and do not let sin dwell in your tent. So Chazal learn out from that pasuk in Iyov that things, articles, items, objects that can be used for sins, for averos, for transgression, should not even be kept in our possession. We should get rid of anything that might lead us to astray, might lead us to commit a sin. So therefore, inaccurate weights, dishonest weights shouldn't even be in our possession, should never be in our home or in our place of business, because we might use them. As the Gemara continues, perhaps sometimes a person will be in a rush when it comes bein hashmashos time, dusk time on Erev Shabbos, and he'll take these weights by mistake and he'll use them. So the Gemara says, don't have anywhere in your possession inaccurate scales or weights, because you might even if you don't intend to deceive anyone or to cheat anyone. What happens if you're in a rush for like Erev Shabbos and someone comes and says, "Oh, quickly, I need to buy a pound of butter," and you have a little grocery store. Oh, okay, and you grab the weight and you measure out a pound of butter. Well, you could end up giving the person less than a pound because you used an inaccurate weight, even though you didn't intend to deceive them. So the Gemara says, don't even have these inaccurate weights around. Tif'olam, and that's why the pasuk in Tehillim says, give them according to their actions. Mishas asiyo, that's a reference to the fact that it's forbidden to even make inaccurate weights, and you violate a prohibition as soon as you make them, even before you use them. Next paragraph, ve'im yishtamesh bohem, if you not only have them, which is a prohibition, but you also use them to cheat someone, oz kiroam alaleihem, then the next part of the pasuk takes effect, which is according to the evil of their deeds or of their schemes. Then you're not only violating the prohibition of having these inaccurate weights, but you're actually using them to cheat people. And so the pasuk in Tehillim, the second pasuk, refers to both aspects, both parts of this avera that involve the inaccurate weights. Now the Zera Shimshon continues in that pasuk. The next few words say, "K'ma'aseh yedehem ten lahem," according to the actions of their hands, give them. Shaharibis nikra neshech. Those words are referring to the prohibition of charging interest, which is called neshech. Another word in the Torah for charging interest is neshech, which means to take a bite. Shehu noshech es halove me'at me'at. When you charge interest, you're taking little bites, one by one, from the borrower. The borrower needs money, and so he says, "Sure, I need the money. Lend me the money, and I'll pay the interest." And little by little, you're taking a bite out of him because he's borrowing money because he doesn't have much money. And now, not only is he going to have to pay you back the principal that you lent him, the actual amount that you lent him, but he's going to have to keep adding interest to that, like a little bite. You're taking little bites out of him. Ad shemafsido harbe, until he could lose a lot of money. If the interest rate is high enough, or if the amount of time that the person is going to pay off the loan is a long enough time, then the borrower, the lovet, could lose a lot of money based on this loan. Nowadays, with the high interest rates, and if we ever look at doing a mortgage or something, we can understand, or buying a car, how much extra you have to pay with high interest rates. And that's the concept that we're seeing here. Unechosov mismotitin. And the property of the borrower will dwindle away. It will disappear. It will be used up. Ukemo shehem garmu, just like the chargers of interest caused she'oso halove yafsid, that borrower who they're charging interest from will lose money, the yamuch minachasav, and he will be deprived of his property. Kein heim yismotetu minichsehem. So they, in the end, will lose their property. Shahamalve beribus nechosiv mismotetin, because the Gemara in Bava Metzia says someone who lends money with interest, his own property will ultimately dwindle. His own property will ultimately be diminished. So therefore, the words in the pasuk, "Kemase yadehem tein lahem," give them according to what their actions are, fits perfectly, the Zera Shimshon says, with the prohibition of charging interest, because we know from another quote in the Gemara that people who charge interest are going to have their property diminished, just like they diminished the property of the borrowers who they were charging interest from. Then the next words in the pasuk, "Hashev gemulam lahem," return to them their recompense, give them a punishment based on what they did. The Zera Shimshon says that refers to the tzitzis. Misha eno lovesh tzitzis, that refers to someone who doesn't wear tzitzis with the proper techeles dye, ela kola elon, but rather they wear the dye from indigo. They wear a plant-based dye, which is don't fulfill the mitzvah of techeles with that. Yoshuv amolo berosho. The pasuk is saying their actions should come back on their own head. What does that mean? Shesamael yachzik bo. Samael is a name for the satans. The satan will grab hold of this person. V'chol hamazikim yazikuhu, and all of the powers of impurity will be able to damage this person. And what's the hint to this? That if you trick people about your tzitzis and you're not really wearing the right type of tzitzis to fulfill the mitzvah, that you could be damaged. Shekola gematria sama, because the word kola, which is an abbreviation for kola elon, which is the indigo, the plant-based dye, has the same numerical value, which is 131, I believe, 131, as the word Samael, which is 131, which again is the name of the Satan. So a person who does this trick, tries to deceive people about their tzitzis with the indigo plant-based dye, is opening himself up, chas v'shalom, to punishments from Samael. Umi shetome mishkalosav b'melach, and someone who buries his weights in salt, nikra shekofer b'hashgacha. This person is denying Hashem's control and supervision of what happens in the world. Now we're moving, this Zera Shimshon is moving to the third pasuk in Tehillim, and he starts by saying, talking about, again, returning to the person who is manipulating the weights that he used, the measurements that he uses. V'chofer b'tzias mitzrayim u'v'vriyas ha'olam. And this person is, by his actions of manipulating these weights and measurements and thinking Hashem won't know, is denying God's the exodus from Egypt and the creation of the world. In other words, it's as if he's saying God doesn't really know what's going on. God isn't involved with what's happening in the world. As long as I can trick people and get away with it, then I'll be okay, because either God doesn't know or God won't do anything about it. V'zehu, and this way of acting, ki lo yavinu el pe'ulos Hashem, is referred to in the third pasuk with the words, they do not understand the actions of Hashem. They totally don't get the fact that Hashem is watching and supervising everything and is aware of everything that's going on in the world. And Hashem does punish people for their averos. But they don't think that, and therefore the words, they don't understand how Hashem operates, so to speak, apply to them. Continuing, Umisha tola kola elon, and the person who wears the fake tzitzis, eino mevin maaseh yodav. That person is referred to in the pasuk as not understanding the actions of Hashem's hands. What do the actions of Hashem's hands have to do with tzitzis? Shel HaKadosh Baruch Hu, the actions of Hashem, of the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Dahainu harakia. This refers to the sky. The Chsiv, as a pasuk in Tehillim says, Ki eresh shamecha maaseh etzbeosecha. I see your heavens, the work of your fingers. When we look at the sky, we can see, if we have the proper understanding of Hashem, we can see, look, that can only be made by Hashem. The skies and everything above the skies can only be made by the handiwork of Hashem. And techeles domel ayam. One of the reasons Hashem commanded techeles, according to the Gemara, is because that color is similar to the color of the sea. The yom domel rakia, and the color of the sea is similar to the color of the heavens, of the sky. And so when we look at the techeles, when we have, if we have the merit to have the correct techeles, either now or in the future, when we look at the techeles, that should remind us of the color of the ocean, which should also then remind us of the sky. And when we think of that, then we are always thinking of Hashem, Shamayim, of the heavens above us, and that reminds us to think of Hashem and consider Hashem in all of our actions. Last paragraph: Umisha malve beribis, is someone who lends money on interest. Yoser mimai shemarvichin mafsidin, more than they profit, they will end up losing. V'lochein, and therefore the pasuk in Tehillim, again, this is the third reference to the last few words in the third pasuk. Yehersein, the pasuk says, destroy them. The call me shemal ve'beribus nechasav mismotetin. As we said before, the Zera Shimshon quoted the Gemara in Bava Metzia. Someone who lends money with interest, his property will be diminished. V'lo yivneim, and then it says, and don't build them up. And that's based on the following. Because we say also in the 5th chapter of Bava Metzia, the Gemara asks a very interesting question. It says, wait a minute, lots of people lose their money even though they don't charge, don't lend money with interest. Why is the Gemara saying that when you lend money with interest, you're going to lose your property and your wealth is going to diminish? We see that happens to people sometimes who don't lend money at all, and don't lend money with interest ever under any circumstances. The Gemara says, so what are you trying to say? So the Gemara answers, halalu, those people who don't lend money with interest, that's not a prohibition they would ever do. Mismotetin v'olin, their property might diminish, but it'll come back. It'll rise up again. V'halalu, but these other people who are violating this transgression of ribis, mismotetin ve'enon olim. We're saying that they're gonna, their wealth, their property will be diminished, and it will not bounce back. It will not go up again after that. So the Zera Shimshon once again has shown us, this is very similar actually to last week's piece, where he starts with psukim that don't, in that case he started with psukim that didn't seem to have anything to do with the midah, the characteristic, the trait of anava, of humility, and he showed us how the psukim were actually full of references to anivus, to humility. And here he took 3 psukim from Tehillim that didn't seem to have anything to do with Yetzias Mitzrayim, with the Exodus from Egypt, and the connection of the Exodus from Egypt of these 3 mitzvos. People who cheat, so to speak, or deceive with their tzitzis, who deceive with their inaccurate weights, or who take advantage of people and deceive them and charge them interest. In all 3 cases, the Zera Shimshon didn't just connect those things one time, but connected them throughout the 3 psukim, kind of repeatedly over and over again. So things are not always what they appear. And when you have the Zera Shimshon, when you're studying Zera Shimshon, he often shows us that very clearly. Yasher koach to everyone for learning together this week, and we look forward, God willing, to learning in the Zera Shimshon again together next week.